What you are about to witness is nothing more than a love letter. A love letter to one of the greatest books of our time. A book full of misery, miracles, menace, and magic. A magic that I would like to discover with you today. Welcome to Murakami World. In 2002, Haruki Murakami has released Kafka on the Shore. It was his book number 10 and is one of, if not the most famous books of Murakami. His style is tempered with surrealistic elements and mixes the real world with fantastic forces. Although his stories are set in Japan, readers from any corner in the world can relate to the characters, as Haruki is heavily influenced by Western elements. Murakami has repeatedly been ranked among the most popular and influential Japanese authors of all time. When Kafka on the Shore has been released, his most famous works were Norwegian Wood, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, and South of the Border, West of the Sun. But many other works that have already been released by this time enjoy cult status today. This documentation is published in celebration of the 20th birthday of Kafka on the Shore. It deserves a film of its own because it is a magical gateway to another world. If you remember, I opened this documentary with a quote. The quote was, "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm's all about." This quote appears quite at the start of the book. I didn't choose this quote for nothing. It's complex on so many levels. If you look at it objectively, unrelated to the story and as a pure quote about life, it's already very inspiring. The storm can be any challenge in life, maybe a personal obstacle, a new period, or a great misfortune. It seems hard at the beginning, undefeatable and perhaps endless. But it will be over one day. And you surely know that it will change you. It can make you stronger and it may beat you. But as the quote said, one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. For those who never read Murakami, this is a perfect quote to introduce his writing style. He uses infinite metaphors to describe feelings and imaginations. His books themselves are often a single metaphor, and that's why it is often hard to describe his works. You have to experience it yourself. Kafka on the Shore follows no rules, is at the same time impressively logical and confusingly illogical. It built me up and it also made me sad. I lost myself in the pages and decided to just let myself drift. And that floating feeling is what I fell in love with. This quote, "This storm," is nothing more than the opener to Murakami's world. This time, Kafka on the Shore itself is the storm, and it will challenge you to stay the same person once you have finished it. Coming back to this opening, these words are being whispered to Kafka Tamura, one of the main characters. The words appear inside his head by a sluggish voice. The voice belongs to a boy named Crow. Crow appears whenever Kafka feels unsecured, needs advice, or is in a stressed situation. And this is indeed the case when the story starts. Kafka has just turned 15 years old and wants to escape from home. It is not his real name, he decides to take it over in honor of Franz Kafka. At the same time, the story of Nakata, the second main character, is told. Nakata's story starts when he is looking for a lost cat. He uses unusual ways because instead of just searching, he talks directly to other cats. During the course of the book, unusual and extraordinary things happen and the story takes drastic turns that captivate the reader with every following page. Together, we will explore the story, try to divine and interpret it, understand the references and entanglements, and maybe you and I will find a meaning. The first chapter served to describe the initial story of Kafka on the Shore. But a good story lives not from the actions only, but also from its characters. And that's the next point that makes Kafka on the Shore so great. In chapter number 2, we devote ourselves to the characters. Coming back to Kafka's starting point, you may ask yourself why he is escaping from home and runs away from his father. Nobody can tell his story better than Kafka himself.
My name is Kafka Tamura. My father always told me that I will kill him one day. I can see the truth.
Your visions do not fool you. You have to run away. Your heart is like a long river after a towering spell of rain.
I must escape from my prophecy. What if I fail?
You are the strongest 15-year-old in the world. You are the sandstorm. Your life has just begun.
I have to run away.
It is time. Take the bus.
Where am I going?
Takamatsu, it is your destiny.
No one notices me. I'm just a boy on a journey. The road is long, but time means nothing to me.
Happy birthday, Kafka.
Thank you. We are there, Crow.
Welcome to your new life. Will you call the girl that you met on the bus?
I feel caught like a fish in the water. What if she's my sister?
Free yourself. Do what you love. Lose yourself in books. You are the strongest boy in the world.
The Komura Memorial Library. Time seems to have stopped in the beautiful old building, and everyone here loses himself in books. Kafka feels like he has finally found the place he has been looking for so long. It is exactly the hidden corner of the world he could only imagine in his deepest fantasies. Kafka feels free and safe here, even if there is a heavy shadow on his shoulders. Once he has lost himself in the books, young Oshima, who works at the library, starts talking to him. Oshima is polite, charming, and intelligent, and he takes time talking to Kafka. He knows that he is a bit older than him, but right from the first conversation, he clearly shows his new visitor that he thinks that Kafka is capable of understanding deeper subjects. And so, the first of their many conversations centers around gender identity. Oshima uses examples of ancient times, and he develops a talk about body and mind, resulting into a first hint of his own identity, which he reveals later to Kafka. Oshima identifies as a gay transgender man, feeling conflicted about himself, and therefore he can understand Kafka. Oshima will be one of the very few persons Kafka is ready to open up to, about his fears and the dark prophecy he believes in. Kafka's father predicted that he will get killed by his son one day, and also that Kafka will sleep with his mother and his sister. Kafka hasn't seen both since they left the family when he was 4 years old, and this is the reason why he is always afraid that he could meet one of them. Maybe you remember that Crow has asked him if Kafka is going to see the girl again he met on the bus. This girl is Sakura. Sakura had a chat with Kafka on the road to Takamatsu, and she left him her number. Kafka's fear is immediately present, and he is scared that Sakura could be his lost sister. But since Sakura has a comforting, trusted appeal on him, he will call her later in a situation of the book. The Komura Memorial will be the gateway to many important stations of this boy's new life. It is his first shelter in a new home, his safe place and a comfort zone, his start into new friendships, and also the place where he will meet another important person beside Oshima. Oshima takes care of Kafka, but he only has limited possibilities as he is not the owner of the library. Kafka has seen the owner, but Oshima is his real caregiver and offers him to stay at the place that Kafka loves so much. But first, before Oshima has the permission to arrange Kafka's new room, he brings him away into a calm place in the forest until things are cleared. Kafka spends some days, finds a seething peace which won't last forever, and will be then picked up by his new friend again. It is time to actually meet the owner of the Komura Memorial Library.
And then I met Miss Saeki.
My name is Satoru Nakata. Nakata is very grateful to introduce himself. He does not speak often to other people because Nakata's mind is not so bright. But Nakata was not always like this. When Nakata was a little boy, he was on a school trip. He can't remember much, but it is said that something happened on this day. Nakata's memories are sucked out like water from the bathtub. People say that a strange sound came from the sky. Nobody was aware of the danger. And then everybody fell asleep. All kids woke up except of Nakata. When Nakata woke up 3 weeks later, he forgot the whole world and became dumb. Mother cried a lot because Nakata was dumb. Father did not cry. He was always angry. But Nakata never lost his smile.
From all stories in Kafka on the Shore, the one of Old Man Nakata is the most touching one. Since the strange incident he has faced as a little boy, he lost most of his abilities and seems to have disappointed his parents, who weren't really able to get along with the new situation. From these days on, Nakata spends an almost lonely life and has learned instead another ability, which is special and leads into his new adventure. He can talk to cats. And so, the now analphabetic and jobless Nakata is being hired as a tracker for lost cats. Nakata, who always speaks of himself in third person, mentions in almost every of the rare conversations he has that he is grateful for Mr. Governor, who sends him financial help. Even if he is lonely, he is kind and friendly to everyone he meets. And every time he introduces himself, he mentions that he is dumb because most people say so. And therefore Nakata thinks that this must be true. His journey starts when he is looking for the missing cat Goma. Nakata meets the very friendly cat Otsuka and starts an interesting conversation. Unfortunately, Otsuka never heard of Goma, but Nakata takes the opportunity to reveal a bit of himself, at least the parts that he knows. When he tells Otsuka that he is dumb, the cat immediately insists that this can't be the case because talking to cats is a very special gift. Otsuka notices that Nakata's shadow seems a little bit weak and that the old man should look for the other half of it, instead using his time to find lost pets. Very early in the book, the readers will face some chapters with interviews between the US-American Lieutenant Robert O'Connell and teachers, doctors, and professors from Yamanashi. The subject is the Rice Bowl Hill incident, which took place in 1946 and is the happening that Nakata has described to you a few minutes ago. It was a happening during World War II, when warplanes were on a way to or from a raid and suddenly left all kids unconscious. Since then, violence spreads through Nakata's life. He will meet several imaginations during his journey, and two of them are Johnny Walker, the striding man from the whiskey commercial, and Colonel Sanders, the founder of KFC. They are only two of so many symbols in the book and seem to be Nakata's trauma treatments, as they are typical icons of Western life that he uses to cope with a disease that has been initialized by Western fighters in Japan. But this is not the only thing. World War II was the cut between imperial and modern Japan, and right from the very beginning, the reader will find a connection between Kafka and Nakata. Every time Kafka passes out, Nakata seems to lose himself and drifts into brutal situations he seems not to control. Kafka is young, Nakata is old. The old Japan meets young Japan. As Nakata's story evolves, he will meet several persons that are able to keep pace with his kindness. One important person in Nakata's story is the truck driver Hoshino. Hoshino is patient with Nakata and gives him the feeling to understand him. But it is an honest feeling, as he really is interested in understanding the old man. Nakata has another special ability. He claims to be able to make things rain from the sky, and this does indeed happen when fishes rain from the sky. And even if Nakata is responsible for so many things in the story, he is no villain. He is kind and humble, and he wishes to have the ability to control his powers. He never intends to do bad. Nakata is a victim of his environment, and someone had to remove half of his spirit to make him do the things he does.
I am Miss Saeki. My life ended when I was 20 years old. Maybe before. It feels like the ocean has carried away my soul. But without any destination. The emptiness in my heart feels endless. I have not changed in all that time. I only got to know who I really am.
The story of Miss Saeki is tragic and beautiful at the same time. Right from the start, she is being introduced as a mysterious and engaging woman that bears huge responsibility, but is a sensitive human being that copes with her past and takes an important role in Kafka's life. Miss Saeki is the owner of the Komura Memorial Library and is being introduced to Kafka by Oshima. As Oshima tells him, Miss Saeki's life ended when she was 20 years old. Of course, it has not ended physically, but in a very emotional way. Her true love, her longtime boyfriend and the son of the Komura family, has been killed by a group of young students. Since then, Miss Saeki misses half of her shadow, just as Nakata does. But her emptiness is incomparable to Nakata's, who has lost most of his learning abilities. Miss Saeki has lost her joy in living. She devotes herself on the library and therefore meets Kafka in a quite cold manner at first. Since half of her shadow and her joyful life is lost, also her aging process seems to have stopped, or better to say, slowed down. She is described as an ageless beauty by Murakami. As Nakata is introduced earlier than Miss Saeki in the book, readers will understand the slight connection between the two. They share a similar fate, it is just expressed in a different way. At one point in the story, Kafka asks Oshima the following question: "Do you think it's possible for someone to become a ghost while they're still alive?" He asked this question for a good reason. Every time he falls asleep, he meets the younger version of Miss Saeki in his dreams, and the two start an intimate relationship. Miss Saeki seems to be a living spirit, something that Dr. Shigenori Tsukayama, the psychiatrist who described Nakata's symptoms, explained earlier to Lieutenant Robert O'Connor. Living spirits and also spirit projections are present in Japanese folklore and literature. While Oshima, who is a book nerd, relies on literature, the professor relies on folklore. Every time Kafka carefully tries to understand if Miss Saeki can remember any of these nights together, she seems to not understand it, which is a sign that Kafka is imagining this only. But her ageless beauty attracts him and he soon falls in love with her. Whether he has real feelings for her or if the fear of his father's prophecy that Kafka will sleep with his estranged mother one day subconsciously lead to this attraction is not sure. But the fact that Miss Saeki lost her love at an age that could look like Kafka, who is in fact 15 years old, but looks a bit older than this, and the song she wrote for this person, which is called Kafka on the Shore, lead to an encounter both will have later on the beach. Kafka firmly believes that he absolutely must be in love with Miss Saeki, because he is sure that she is his mother. His fear of the prophecy causes him to act accordingly, driving him into a relationship with a much older woman. Meanwhile, Miss Saeki is caught up in her past and remembers her late love. That is why there is a strong attraction between the two. They help each other getting over a loss. Kafka, who has lost his mother, and Miss Saeki, who has lost her boyfriend. Welcome to the limbo. The limbo is the neutral point between life and death. A kind of sad and gloomy place. The place where the threads converge to link up the world. This is where all comes together. Sometimes in a logical, other times in an illogical way. But does everything need to make sense? Isn't it enough that we know that all our souls are connected in a certain way? The limbo is a forest. At least this is how Johnny Walker explains it. For those who haven't read Kafka on the Shore yet, I won't tell who talks about the limbo, but it's fair enough to call it a place where every spirit has an escape from violence. And violence is present all the time. No matter if an inner voice encourages to kill, or maybe a stronger soul forces the weak body to greater deeds. Our characters cope with violence. And in some mental states, there's a deep connection between them. Some share the same fate of a half-shadow. Others share the same fear of loss and grief. And then there are some that have been faced with a tragic accident that changed their life. But it is not only a place to connect. It is also an interstation for the spirits that have abandoned their bodies. While the body is wandering around in the real world without soul or mind, the spirit waits for the shape to return home. And as long as the spirit stays in the limbo, it is protected from violence. All souls that meet here have another thing in common. They have experienced a trauma and seek refuge in the forest. But the forest is able to lift the spirit to higher abilities, to swap bodies and achieve acts that the other figure is not able to fulfill. Let it be encounters, fights, or tasks of higher needs. Have you ever asked yourself why Kafka is so mature for his age, while Nakata lost his maturity when he was in coma? Have you ever asked yourself why both Kafka and Nakata accept the fact that they have to follow a certain path and accept their fate? To understand is to perceive patterns. And to understand the logic of Kafka on the Shore is to understand Murakami's world. Murakami's world is not always understandable, but it follows a pattern. And this pattern is magic. Magic means influencing events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. Magic is also the skill of performing tricks to entertain people. But Murakami's real magic is to create dreams. Interviews with him are rare. Haruki is considered to be shy and humble. But sometimes, some journalists manage to get interviews with him and ask the questions they always wanted to ask. Like the following, where he has been asked if he has a special gift in writing. The reply was, "To be honest, I don't think about it. This is a dangerous subject. I prefer to put it another way. I would say I have the ability to create dreams. It's not a talent, it's a skill I really enjoy. When you wake up, your dreams disappear. I can recapture my dreams and just speak them out as I write. Therein lies my skill as a writer." The journalist digs deeper and asks him, "The worlds in your books often have two sides. The normal worlds collide with supernatural elements." Murakami replies, "I don't separate that. For me, there is no realistic or unrealistic side. For me, it's all one. I just follow the story. When you dream, you don't separate between these two worlds either. In your head, they flow together. I always start with a realistic story. Sometimes unusual things happen, but I try not to conjure about anything like that. I believe in the supernatural at heart, and when I encounter it as I write, I rejoice as if I'm meeting an old friend. But I don't plan or calculate that. I just look what happens and write that down. Observing and writing seems completely natural to me. I don't follow any plan. When being asked how feedbacks from different parts of the world look like, he gives us the final solution for all the magic behind his books and why we try to understand them. There are big differences. The supernatural aspects in my books do not affect Asian readers because they take it for granted that something realistic and something unrealistic might happen on the same day. European and Western readers analyze a lot. They like to read clear messages. Asian readers accept what is written more easily. It's just a different perspective. So why do we often find it difficult to understand his works? It's obvious. As a spoiled audience, we often get the solutions and explanations right on the screen while we are watching a movie. Even if unnatural things happen, we just suck in what we see. It is the intoxication of images that rains down on us. While reading, we have to build up the images ourselves. Our mind is being trained. We create a world which looks, scents, and colors are explained in words to us, and therefore we question it the more we think about it. Reading a book grants more time for reflection. And even if Murakami's style is unique, many questions are left open or things seem ambiguous. His books leave an impact on us. Kafka on the Shore is by far the most famous work of Murakami. It has been realized as a stage play, inspired thousands of illustrators or musicians, and is also the highest discussed Murakami novel on YouTube. One particular channel reviews and analyzes Murakami's works, and Kafka on the Shore in particular, in such a wonderful and creatively stunning way that it is a joy to watch him. I am talking of A.G. MacDonald. A.G. speaks to us in his cartoonized form and delivers, from my point of view, the most brilliant and terrific content you can get on Kafka on the Shore. I was lucky enough to talk to him. A.G., first of all, thank you very much for taking time to answer some questions. Please take us through your story. What was your first Murakami book, and at which point of this book did you decide to create your initial video about his work?
Thank you for having me. It should probably come as no surprise that my first Murakami book was Kafka on the Shore, and I think that the way that I came to it is kind of interesting based on the themes in that book, and Murakami himself saying that he became a writer because he knew he was destined to after going to a baseball game, which kind of doesn't make sense on the surface of things, but that sums up Murakami, doesn't it? My relationship with Murakami started when I was in a bookshop, and I had just got off work and I was looking for something new to read, and I went through the shelves and this book just jumped out at me. And no offense to the Chip Kid covers, but this is the vintage UK cover, and it's simply just a red circle with a black silhouette of a cat, and I was just drawn to it. And then the name Murakami at the top, which at the time meant nothing to me. I didn't know who he was, so I was just drawn to it, and there was something about that cover, which I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do. So I started reading this book, and it was just this like mind-opening experience to read a book that was very different to anything that I ever read before. And despite how different it was, how out there it was, like I couldn't pull focus from this story. I was just so engaged by it. But that was my first experience. And as for my channel, like that was something where I was basically just documenting all the kinds of books that I read, and I read so many different books, but you know, I just thought, well, do you know what? I love Kafka on the Shore. Why not just talk about that? And there's such a huge response to it. There's such a huge community out there that loves to decode things, and it's just amazing. So I love not only that I happened upon the book, I also love that I happened upon an online community of people who want to discuss it.
What does Kafka on the Shore mean to you personally?
So as an author, I think that one of the things that Kafka on the Shore represents is pure, unbridled creativity. And I think that's one of the things that means so much to me personally about the story, and I put it with a bunch of other stuff that's not necessarily related to it that I love, but like the manga One Piece or the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. I love narratives that take chances, that don't worry so much about, oh, not everyone's going to like this, people might think this is silly, people might not understand this. I love when a narrative just goes for it. So I was writing a mystery series, which I wrote 6 books of, and it was great. I loved doing it. It was a film noir style story, but having conversations with people online about Murakami and having conversations with people in real life, then of course going back and rereading Murakami's work in preparation for this deep dive, it made me realize that I wanted to do something like that. And so my book, Red River, has been inspired by books like Kafka on the Shore that aren't necessarily going to give you all the answers, that aren't necessarily going to hold your hand the whole way through it. And so to me, it has profoundly impacted my life creatively and how I make my own work.
If you would need to name your most favorite character, who would that be?
I think my favourite Murakami character should probably come as no surprise, because it's, from what I've understood in my comments section, it's far and away the most popular character, but I think Oshima is my favourite character because of what I said before about that unbridled creativity and not having to fit everything into a box. Oshima is a character that we wouldn't typically see, not only with the gender identity and sexuality issues that come with such a unique character, but also that Murakami doesn't decide to just shove that character into a box and they have to believe this and they have to think this. And I think we do that so much in a lot of Western storytelling. We think, oh, A, B, and C have to fit into this box and X, Y, and Z have to fit into this box. But Murakami doesn't do that, because the whole point of Oshima is that he's a free thinker. And I think that's one of the things I love about him is he doesn't let people tell him what he should and shouldn't think. He's very open to discussion and a very deep and critical thinker, and that's one of the things I think I love most about Oshima. And I guess I can relate on some level to that as well, because my brain will not stop ticking over and will not stop thinking about things, so maybe that's why I like Oshima.
Right. If you could talk to him at one particular point of this book, what would you tell him to improve or change the situation, because you already know what will happen to him?
See, that's a tough one, because with Oshima, I don't know, I feel like Oshima doesn't need to change. Oshima is just awesome as it is.
If you would need to explain Kafka on the Shore in one sentence, how would that sound?
I can't. I don't think anyone can describe Kafka on the Shore in one single sentence, because it encompasses so much. And I think because, and I say this in my very first video in my new series on Kafka on the Shore, but there is the distinct possibility that no one can actually definitively describe what Kafka on the Shore is about. We each have different interpretations of what this bizarre, dreamlike situation is about. But I think that that's the amazing part about it, is you can't fully describe it. You can't succinctly do it in the elevator pitch that apparently every story has to have. But that just ties back to everything that I've already said before about this, is that it doesn't fit the rules. The rules should say that, you've got to have an elevator pitch story where you can turn around and put it into one sentence and, let people know what it's about. But Murakami breaks the rules with that, and the story is that much better for it. It's a more involved process, and you need to try and dive deeper into figuring out what the story is about. But in doing so, you have a much richer experience, and you yourself can bring so much more to the table.
Now, if you could talk to someone who hasn't been in touch with Kafka on the Shore yet, how would you convince this person to read the book?
I've tried tried recommending Kafka on the Shore to people in the past, but I'm always a little bit wary because I fully acknowledge that it is not for everybody. And that's why when people say in the comment sections of my videos, am I the only person that hates this book? Am I the only person that really can't stand this book? No, there's lots of people who don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's why I'm always very careful as to who I recommend it to. I have recommended it to friends before, but they need to be into that whole surreal, out there storytelling and being comfortable with the fact that they may not have all the answers and just reveling in that and enjoying the mystery of it all. So I guess that kind of answers your question, that if someone hadn't read it before, I would scope things out and sort of think, would you be interested in reading this to begin with? Because there are a lot of people who aren't, and that's perfectly fine. But again, I think that speaks to the quality of this book, that it is appealing to a niche market of people. It's not trying to say, we've got this strange notion now that every story has to be for every single person. But stories like this prove that it's just not everyone's cup of tea. But when you hone in on a group that love a particular thing rather than trying to appeal to everyone, you get a much richer experience.
AG, thank you for taking time to talk to me, and we are stoked to see your upcoming project. Best of luck to you. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I've had a great time discussing Murakami with you. I mean, it's what I do, it's what I love, so thank you.
The influence of Kafka on the Shore on pop culture and readers in general is massive. A few weeks ago, I asked you on social media to tell me your personal story of Kafka on the Shore, what it means to you and what your favorite quote or character is. I didn't expect so many answers, so here's only an excerpt of your stories. Kimo wrote, I read this book after I dropped out of college and finished it like a couple days before I left for a 3-month trip to Japan. It was a very comforting book at the time, and it was very symbolic during that period of my life, as I felt like Kafka and Crow. I finished the book and left it on the ground, covered from the rain, but it really felt like I was closing a chapter, similar to how Kafka closed his own. Sometimes life can be as exciting as fiction, and it's the best when our own lives run parallel to Murakami's novels. It just makes it all that much more exciting, and we have the hope that we will be okay, like how we hope that Kafka is okay. Kati told me, I love Murakami's way to connect the dots between simplicity and deep dark secrets of human beings. Another message came from Brian. It was Oshima who I paid the most attention to when I was reading Kafka on the Shore. I can resonate with his resentment of how a certain civil movement could be pro-Christian. I'd say that novel probably taught me when to hide in my little bubble when needed, instead of feeling enraged by people who preach empty slogans. Also a big thanks to Mr. C for sharing his story with me. He wrote me, my favorite quote is, "You can never put it together like it was." What it means to me? Being that my parents were divorced, I had experienced some things the main character was dealing with, or at least I could relate. My experience with the book? The book was a little darker than what I was expecting. And my interesting story with the book? I got it free at our library, and it was the first or second Murakami novel that I read. Every one of us has his own single story, and this is the way how we remember Kafka on the Shore. As we are getting closer to the end, we have reached the end of the storm. And we need to ask ourselves the question if we are still the same person who walked in. From my own perspective, I can tell that this storm named Kafka on the Shore has indeed changed me. Kafka Tamura, Oshima, the old man Nakata, and Miss Saeki are now a major part of my own life story. I love to get back to this book every time I need to dive into another world or to drift inside the limbo. It is fair enough to tell you that I read this book quite late, when I was already 30 years old. It was not my first Murakami, but Murakami brought me back to reading. when I stumbled over Killing Commendatore, I have just escaped from a chapter in my life that has totally wasted and exhausted me. I lost focus, forgot the most important things, and was wandering through a valley of stress, fear, and disturbance. I needed an escape from daily life, a place to stop off at, a station of imagination. Killing Commendatore was the cake. Kafka on the Shore is the icing. Growing up means losing some illusions. If Murakami taught me something, then it is that we should never stop one thing: to dream. We should never stop to dream that we can be heroes. We should never stop to dream of our beloved ones and ask if everything is okay, even if we haven't spoken to them for a long time. A dream can be bad, but it can also be the most beautiful thing. It may take you back to lost memories, to bitter times or grim moments, but it can also lead you to new decisions, ideas, and people. A dream can also show you how things might have turned out if a slight turn in destiny has gone different. Maybe you'll live another life. Maybe you'll meet other persons you can't see in the real world. But one thing is important. We should appreciate the things we have, and we should feel lucky to be on this world. And if we need an escape, if we are fed up with everything around us, we can lose ourselves in books. And now it is time to close this final chapter with a quote from Kafka on the Shore that is not owned by the person who will recite these words for you, but deserves the closing sentences more than anyone else. Even if he says that he might not feel like it, his smile, his personality, and his kindness are more than bright. Nakata-san, the stage is yours.
Every one of us is losing something special to us. Lost opportunities, lost possibilities, feelings we can never get back again. That's part of what it means to be alive. Thank you for your time, my dear listeners.